everybody.
How's it going?
Fairly okay. I had a bit of a thing, so if I don't seem as cheerful and delightful, it's because I'm in a lot of pain. So bear with me.
They give you any good meds? Or are you just like
I
running on ibuprofen?
I declined it. I was offered Percocets, but it was. I stay away. I work in pharmaceuticals, so I stay away from the good stuff because I know we make the medicine behind the scenes, so we know. We're
Yeah.
like,
You know
don't.
how the sausage is made.
Yeah, so I'm like, nope, just some Tylenol, and I'll just kind of, you know, live
Yeah.
off on the edge, I guess. But yeah,
Yeah.
just hang with me, guys. Be very patient with me, and maybe I can do a little. Remember that scene in the scary movie where the guy with the weird hand was touching the stuff? Maybe I'll do that with my weird thing. I just put the hand in the
Ew.
turkey and do weird stuff.
There you go.
So we're going to try to make Luna feel better today. Welcome to Delight and Fright. I'm Kat and our lovely Luna. And today we have a very special guest, Thomas A. Fowler. He is the author of The Thals, The Rising Current, and The Thals Days of Launch, a Rising Current prequel. He's also the author of Make Waits, a sci-fi thriller with a big heart. Interested in finding out more about that. He's also puts together Crash Philosophy, which is a 17 authors, short stories, like a flash fiction. You choose the character, you choose the setting. So I'm interested in finding out more about that as well. He is also writer, director, producer of The Code Legend of the Gamers. And that is his first feature. And he's the assistant director of Demon for Hire and writer for Slasher Sessions, which is a short script entering film festivals and a film occurring in spring of 2024. And it's a feature script complete with 2 sequels you have outlined. So we're interested in finding about all these goodies.
Yeah, it's been a pretty storied career that kind of basically started right out of college. Well, kind of almost in college in a way. But... So yeah. Do you want me to just dive into that like whole kind of narrative? Or...
Yeah, before we get started into the narrative, we have a few people in the house. We have Juan and Paige and some sneaky ninjas in the background that haven't announced themselves. So thank you for trickling in. We're excited to talk. Tell us more, Thomas.
Yeah, so I started doing theater in high school. Did behind the scenes stuff, and then my theater teacher slash director found out I could do dialects and voices. So I started getting cast in like all the small bits that like needed guys with voices. So I did like an old sheriff because I could do a Jimmy Stewart impersonation, and things like that in high school. And that led to me going to UNC, where I got my bachelor's in theater with a minor in writing. And I did improv theater, and my then girlfriend, now wife, was directing a musical theater production of Harvey. And I was supposed to just be like a cameo and help her out. But unfortunately, she lost her lead because it's college. We all have a billion projects going everywhere. And so she relied on me to be her lead. And we had such a blast with that theater production. And we were already doing some video freelance work, doing either like web videos or even filming weddings when they were going on. And so I started writing my first feature around that dinner theater cast because we just like gelled so well. And my buddy who was working with me on the video production, Eric Olson, he really wanted to, he and I just wanted to make a feature. And I was willing to kind of be the writer and such. And so I started just writing the roles. And so that's where we kind of made the code. And it was a mockumentary about video gamers. This is around the PS3 Wii era and things like that. So it just follows 3 teams that are trying to enter a Colorado State tournament and to win a chance to go to the Nationals. So it's kind of like the Christopher Guest, Mighty Wind, Best in Show, those style movies. If you need a more modern reference, it'd be like, What We Do in the Shadows or something along those lines, where it's just the wink and nod to the camera of The Office. The Office was huge at the time we were filming too, so we had a big recurring "That's What She Said" competition going. finding the scenes and everything. It was totally low budget. Like we shot it over the summer while we were all working our day jobs. I was making lasagnas the night before for catering the next day. Our actors were boom operators, lighting operators, whatever we needed. We just kind of made it. We screened at a couple festivals that were very small, and that was kind of all it ever kind of came out of it. But it was just a blast, and that kind of led to us doing another feature horror film. But unfortunately, that one kind of got pulled out from underneath us because that was around the time of the housing recession. And the horror film was primarily financed by a guy who was in real estate. So we were driving out to Missouri to film the movie and found out our budget was getting cut. So we all shacked up in the cabin we were filming in, because it was a cabin, 20-somethings, which I did not write, but I was directing and producing. And it just kind of fell apart from there. I think the better horror movie would have been if they filmed a documentary of us trying to make this work, as we just saw the budget cuts coming and we were just like, I don't know, we'll figure it out. And we didn't. We got about half the movie shot, and we were coming back to Colorado. We found out the rest of the money was gone. So Eric, my producer, and I, we just kind of had to make a choice. It was one of those like, well, either we take out a pretty hefty loan and hope it works, or we kind of call it. And so we did. And that led to me writing books. And, so that was a good stint there. But it's always been my calling to go back to movies and film. And so I was really grateful, because it's one of those weird happenstance things where while I was doing the book circuit, going to Denver Comic Con, Myths and Legends Con, all these different Colorado conventions, I met Travis Heerman, he is an author who's written so many great books. And that led to him making his own short. And he knew I worked in advertising and knew how to run sets and had background in film. So he's like, do you think you could help me AD this? I'm like, sure. I know how to keep a, commercial on time and under budget and everything. And it just kind of reignited it, which is lovely. It's one of those weird full circle moments where, you follow one thing, it leads to the next, and it just kind of helps guide you on your creative journey, I guess this would be the summary. So that's why I'm kind of going back to film. It's been itching at me to kind of, I wouldn't say right the wrongs of that horror film shoot, but at least kind of just get another go at it. I got knocked down pretty hard on that one. So I'm getting back up and putting myself back in the ring and seeing if I get knocked out again, or if I can actually win a bout, if you will.
That makes a lot of sense. And thank you so much for letting us know about, your past and your, what you're trying to accomplish. That's very important, especially for indie people to know kind of like what their next projects are going to be, especially to see how am I going to do this, especially as a independent, person that may not have all the backing like Universal and, the big money machines you probably don't have access to. So it's very important to kind of figure out a plan. Have you figured out what type of movie you want to make in the future?
Yeah, I'm all over the place, because I was actually just recently laid off from my advertising job for the second time. I got my first one during the middle of COVID. And so while I was job hunting, I also utilized that time heavily to write as much as possible. So I worked on the Slasher Sessions feature script, just revising it and figuring it. And I was bringing it down. It was way too aspirational for being my first feature back, just in terms of thinking about the actual making of it. I always try to like when I'm doing the first ideas, first outlines, I don't worry about the budget. But now I'm starting to think about it really happening, because the short is working. I've got my lead, I've got my makeup artist. We're starting to scout locations. I'm starting a production management interactive course it's going to help me put all those small pieces together again. And so I rewrote that script, and I also wrote a whole new feature that's actually just an indie comedy, almost a little bit more like Little Miss Sunshine, in terms of just, really endearing kind of comedy. So I'll be probably hopping all over the place, because I also have a bunch of outlines, and they range from period dramas to additional horror films, just with weird ideas that I come up with. And things like that. So it's going to be all over the place, honestly. I don't want to pigeonhole myself into one genre specifically, because I haven't written in one genre. If you look at like my bookshelf back here and the things I've been published in. It varies from horror to a poetry collection to a marketing book, since I have advertising, and here's sci-fi. I'm trying to weatherman this time and things like that. My experience has been all over the place. My first short story was a steampunk anthology, and I'm not a steampunk dude, but the guy who was putting together was in my writing group. We were doing critiques, helping each other out, and he just said, I need some good stories. Do you know steampunk? I'm like, I don't, but I will get you a story. Things like that. And it's been kind of one of those weird adventures of just saying yes to whatever my little mind decides to jump into. So.
Yeah, some of the best works of art it's not just one genre, right? Life is varied, right? So I love works of art that don't really fit completely under one genre. So I love that you're keeping your options open. Mm-hmm. And I love that, you realize when doors are closed to you, windows open, and you're taking advantage of that and trying to pivot as best you can, as we all have to learn how to navigate through this crazy world, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing I've found, the further I've gotten in this journey, is you're able to kind of take those blows a little bit easier. Like that horror movie kind of wrecked me for a while. I was having a hard time kind of finding an inspiration into what I was going to do next. But now that I've gotten further along, I'm learning to roll with the punches. Perfect example is my second novel, Make Waits. I finally got that traditional publishing contract with a publishing company, right? I chased that for a good 5-6 years. And I got over 100 rejections for my first book before I self-published it. But then, of course, the pandemic hit, and the publishing company that released my second book went under in less than a year. So it was one of those things where it stung, but I also didn't let it stop me. So I now have the covers. I've got the audiobook, so I can release it myself now. I just need to talk to my friend who does book formatting to try to fix it up and make sure it's my name under the publishing company now instead of the one that went under, which was really just a bummer because they were really a great team, but the further you go into that journey, the more you learn that it's just what happens. The more you talk to people who are in either indie writing for books, movies, it doesn't matter. You've got to take a lot of hits. You got to get a lot of rejections, unless you just know somebody and there's a bunch of nepotism going on. But that's a whole nother thing. Unless all the stars align and you catch lightning in a bottle, you're just going to be doing a little bit of an uphill battle. And if it matters that much to you, you'll just keep on trying and keep on going.
That makes a lot of sense. I wanted to ask you personally about what type of books do you like writing? What is your passion? What is your main interest? Do you like more of the fantasy horror, or sci-fi horror, thrillers, mysteries? What are you writing?
It's definitely sci-fi. Horror is where I lean. That's my sweet spot. Primarily because I was a kid when the first Jurassic Park came out, and I was, here's where I'm going to date myself. I went to the mall and saw the movie in theaters, right? And then as soon as the movie was over and I saw it based on Michael Crichton, I hopped over to that Walden Books and got the paperback, right? And as a result, it allowed me to start reading the book by Michael Crichton, and it just kind of ignited me, in terms of creative thinking. So I saw a question come in about, do you have a favorite genre? I think it would be sci-fi, but Kat, kind of like you, I like sci-fi that also blends genres, because Jurassic Park has elements of horror. It has elements of techno thriller, as well as just good old sci-fi. And one of my favorite books or favorite movies is also Edgar Wright's Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, where it's no, we're mixing a rom-com with a zombie movie, right? I'm stuttering a little bit on my stream. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine. It looks like your video has a hard time catching up, but your audio's coming through pretty well.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, your video stopped for a little bit, so I wanted to do a quick spot check.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So yeah, I think it's sci-fi, but then it's also branching out into all the different categories of, or combined genres of sci-fi as well.
And I had a question. What was it about? Because you wrote the Thals, the Rising Current, and then you revisited that same story with a prequel. What was it about your uh, the first one that you felt you kind of needed to go back and revisit that and give us more?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was that I had so much material. The first draft I wrote of it was way too long. Like, I knew it wasn't going to be okay with traditional publishers when I started submitting it. And as a result, I had a ton of material left over. And so I had enough materials that I could do this prequel. And also in terms of branding myself, I also had a newsletter going at the time. I'm working on reviving it. But part of the thing was that if you signed up for the newsletter, you would get the prequel novella, an ebook version for free. So it was kind of a way for me to use these chapters that I loved, but just couldn't quite make it into the novel, and expanded on the characters and things like that, and just kind of told a little bit more of the story, and also gave an incentive for people to sign up for the newsletter because then they got the ebook for free.
Nice. That's really smart. It's a great way to use that art that that you produced and you loved it, and sometimes it doesn't always make its way into the book, the final product, but you can still give it out as like little Easter eggs to the fans, and I think that's great.
Yeah, exactly. And I also loved the person. Her name was Haley Awali. I might be mispronouncing her last name, but she did such a great job with the audiobook too. Like, she just brought all the characters to life. And by also making an audiobook for the prequel, it just kind of let me just stay in the world, because it took a lot of research, because this is a very Michael Crichton-esque type book in the sense that it is a very near future that deals with crew at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean harnessing deep ocean currents for renewable energy. So I had to learn about like how submersibles work. I talked to submersible divers, got some fun stories from them. I toured a wind farm out in Lyman, Colorado here. I spent 3 hours on a decommissioned submarine from World War II. And that's where I learned I stubbed my toe and almost hit my head like all the time. So I'm like, all right, that has to work my way in. But I also saw like the little nuances of how they like would just take paint and color code their cables so that way they knew how they all connected throughout the submarine and things like that. And so it also just took so much research for me to build that world that I'm like, I need to just keep going because that took too much damn effort. So
I do that too. Like when I'm researching something, I just get so lost in the research and I do way too much. And then I'm like, I get completely lost.
Yeah. Or moments where you do a lot of research and then you find like different portions that you're like, wait a minute, am I going to include that, or is that too much? You know what I mean? Like you go through this rabbit hole of research and you're like, I don't know if I'm going to include that tidbit of it. It's like weird
mhm.
finding like weird like cryptids or stuff like that.
Yeah, and I had to almost cut myself off because I started making like a new employee manual for the station, and it was like it was going a little too far. But at the same time, when I submitted my first draft to my critique group, because I started in theater and film, you don't have to worry about descriptions as much, right? Because you figure that out during the production process. Whereas in a book, you have to paint the picture for the reader, right? And so my first critiques on my chapters were like, I love the characters, the dialogue seems so real. I don't know what the hell's going on, right? And so I had to start building that world out and understand what the space looked like and how it looked. So I did kind of build the station out. So there was a point where like it was beneficial, but then I also started getting like serial codes on each turbine. I'm like, nope, that's too far. I got to stop because that's just a procrastination tool. Kind of thing. That's me getting
Yeah.
anxious and getting nervous about getting the work out into the world. So I need to just start writing because I've got it all built up here. I can explain to the audience or the reader what's
When you
happening
start
now.
becoming Tolkien, it's a bit much, right?
Yeah, nobody needs every barcode for the turbines, just like everybody doesn't need a description of every tree branch. So
But what about the nerds that are like, give me the codes, give me the manuals, give me the maybe like release maybe you can have that and then release like a companion book that has all of
mm,
that. So that way you force them to buy two books. The
yeah,
main one
absolutely.
and the companion book.
Yeah, well, and I've got more art for my cover designer, so I think we could probably make that quite easily in terms of like a welcome manual or something like that, just to kind of introduce them to the Thales, and things like that. Of just like, hey, here's the station, welcome. So
Right. And what genre would you think Thales is in?
it's definitely sci-fi. It's a very near future sci-fi kind of thing. So if you like things like Michael Crichton or The Martian, that would be another kind of comparable one. Because the way I pitched this when I was trying to get an agent was it's the Martian at the bottom of the ocean. Because needless to say, when I put them all down there, I couldn't have everything just go okay, right? That'd be a boring book, right? Maybe a little interesting while they're going down, but to the bottom of the ocean and getting into the station. But I had to have things go completely wrong. So of course, it goes completely bonkers and stuff like that. But that would be the closest I would describe it.
I'm always interested in hearing about a writer's process. What is your process? Do you start with a character, an idea, and then kind of build upon that? I just want a little more detail about how you build your character and your story.
That's a great question. Thank you. So the way that I typically go about it is I normally have like some sort of like pie in the sky idea, right? Like in this case, I just knew I wanted some sort of sci-fi thriller at the bottom of the ocean. I didn't know what. I knew I didn't want to do like a military submarine thing, right? That's been done to death, and I didn't think I was going to do anything to benefit that subgenre. And so I started just researching what was going on with like technology in the ocean, and that's when I found out that off the coast of Scotland, they were starting to put these turbines. One, they were doing the offshore wind ones, which we all know about, right? But they were also testing ones that were going under the water that were using the momentum of the current and the stream to push that. And I'm just like, ooh, we have a lot of strong currents on the West Coast. I bet you if they put some down there, that would be. So then I kind of developed that idea and thought, all right, that's how I'm going to put them down at the bottom. And then I started thinking about, well, who would be down there, right? I started almost building the crew. And then I started coming up with the arc for them. And when I knew it was ready to become a full-fledged story, and this happens across the board, in terms of all my big works, is I have to think of what the ending is. I have to know like what I want either the audience or the reader to feel when either they close the book or finish watching it, what they're going to feel, whether they're just laughing their ass off or if it's like a very cathartic cry. It doesn't matter what it might be, because like I said, I'm not pigeonholing myself into any one genre. But once I can kind of visualize that ending, then it starts really coming together, because then I can start thinking about, all right, how do I get them through that arc to make that mean something or make them feel that big of an emotion? Because I am one of those guys, like I cry all the time in movies. I just bawl, and I'm one of the early ones to just let it go. I don't even care, and things like that. So that's one of the big things that I try to do. Is just try to tell like really emotional stories in very fantastical worlds, I think is what I would say.
Nice. Thomas, I have a kind of like a real question for
Okay.
you. How did you feel because you wrote this like submarine like world? Was it bizarre to you hearing about the Titan submersible implosion that happened? Did that kind of like freak you out a little bit, especially because you're writing some of this stuff?
No, because this book came out a little while ago, and so it's kind of almost off my mind, and my head is in other projects now. I still followed it, and I was just kind of on this. I'm like, well, you're controlling it with a video game controller. Like none of this sounds safe. I don't know what you guys are doing. So it was interesting, if I really wanted to be like the really narcissistic advertising guy, I probably would have tried to capitalize on it, but I didn't, because since I've worked in advertising as well for about a decade, I've seen all of the weird social media plugs or attempts to capitalize on relevant news at the expense of other people's misery and stuff like that. And I tried to avoid it. It's an unfortunate situation. I don't understand why there wasn't better regulations or better testing for that equipment. Honestly, that's what blew my mind the most. I'm just like, how is this okay to just let people do that? I don't understand. I don't know. It seemed like they were just setting themselves up for disaster, and it's a really unfortunate circumstance.
Yeah, I quite agree. Kat, do you have any follow-ups on that? I know that was kind of a little off the deep end,
Yeah,
no
for
pun
sure.
intended. No pun intended there.
Oh, we got to go to the dark side every now and then. Sorry, guys.
I mean, it's
Yeah,
called
it's
delight and fright. So I mean, we're going into the
yeah,
fright side, not
the
necessarily
fright
so much
side.
delight. So
Not much
But I
delightful.
love that you keep your integrity no matter what, right? You have and I wanted to kind of pivot to
mhm.
more of your personal life. You have three daughters, a son. That's a lot, and you keep working, you keep writing, and you have a day job, I'm sure, in different parts in your life. So how do you kind of keep that work life balance?
Yeah, it's finding what works for your schedule. There were definitely periods in the newborn phase where nothing was happening, right? You just have to accept the stage of life you're in, but you can still like work on workshops, ideas. You can do some light work, but in terms of the heavy writing sessions, there's just periods of life where it's just not going to happen. And you just kind of have to roll with it and find ways to make it work. And I actually just started a new job on Friday, so I'm currently this week testing out my new schedule, just to try to make sure that I'm working out regularly, prepping my lunches because I'm a very lazy eater.
Yeah.
If I have nachos as an option, I'm going to take it, kind of thing. So I have to make sure it's not an available option for me, just because now that I'm in my 40s, some of the health issues of my family are starting to say like, hey, take it easy, buddy. You don't have the metabolism you did when you were 25. And it's just finding time to write, whenever it might be possible. So it's astonishing to me though what happens if you just are consistent. That's one that, like, if I could like give one piece of advice about it, it's just try to find what works for you, be open to adapting, but also like consistency and just little chips, right, away at the stone. Before you know it, you'll have like your polished statue, whatever it might be, right? But if you don't do at least some effort, it's just going to remain stagnant, and then you'll let the anxiety build up, and then you start going into that like unfortunate mental or emotional spiral is what I call it, either up or down. If you constantly chip away, it helps kind of show you the progress you're making. And if you let the anxiety of like, crap, I didn't write yesterday, and just not adapt to whatever's going on in your life, then it can cause that spiral downward creatively. And typically my physical health and mental health kind of follows one way or the other. Thankfully, I'm in a pretty good upward swell right now. So hoping to kind of keep that moving in a consistent manner.
Awesome.
Yeah, and thank you so much for allowing us to, speak with you. I know since you mentioned you having a new job, the kids and the family and everything, you must be very busy. So thank you so much for reaching out and for coming on the show. I know that's time is very important to a lot of people, as it should be, and I want to thank you personally for, allowing us to be here with you today.
Absolutely. And I thank you for the opportunity. I'm so glad to talk about this stuff. And it's these sort of conversations sort of bring me life. Anytime I go to a film, like lately I've been doing film festivals, right? Because I've got my script in, and Demon for Hire is still showing up in festivals here and there. Every time you're at those, you just get to meet just awesome people who are just like so passionate about it. Because the thing is, a lot of us have to go through a lot of those failures. And a lot of people drop off from it because it doesn't matter that much to them, or they decide it's just not worth the sacrifice. And what you end up doing is like you end up meeting the people who are still in the fight in a way. Fight is a little aggressive of a word, but still just pursuing that passion. And so I love appearing on like YouTube channels like this. I love going to festivals and just chatting with people about it. They're always just some of the greatest conversations because it's also how I talk about life a lot. One of my favorite fictional characters is Abed Nadir from Community. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but he basically
Yes.
refers to everything in life by referencing pop culture. And that's honestly for me too. It helps me reference where I am in life, what's going on with the story arc of my current chapter, wherever I might be in life. I find that movies and TV are a really good way for me to understand and almost filter the emotion in a way. So yeah, so I mean, I'm just going to throw the thank you right back at you.
Awesome. And I wanted to ask about your crash philosophy. I love reading philosophy. I love talking to people who've taken philosophy and
Yeah.
who've majored in it as well. Can you go into more detail about what this project consists of?
Yeah, so it's funny because like it's not the first time someone's actually wondered if philosophy is a part of it. It's actually not. It's just kind of a catchy title that we liked. But the reason why Crash is involved is because you have 10 characters and 10 settings, and I had all the authors just write a combination of that. So there's 100 different combinations. So it's either like a human baby inside of a spaceship, or a dinosaur that's stuck inside a flying prison, right? Some of them are kind of, and then there's also an evil laboratory, right? And so you can basically, through these anthologies, read any different combination. And it varies all over the place in terms of some are really funny, some are really heartbreaking, and they're all from different authors as well. So you get tons of different ideas, tons of different pieces and stuff. And I still need to get the fourth out because that's actually going to finish us. It's the 10th setting and 10th character. And so it would actually put all 100 together. Initially, I was going to put it all in one book, but then I was like, wait, it's going to be like 700 pages. I can't do that. I often bite off more than I can chew when I first started a project. And I found out real hard about how difficult anthologies are. So
is it like a choose your own adventure type, or
similar.
just the authors kind of they kind of they pick the situations and then they tell the story?
Yeah, that latter part is closer. I mean, it's choose your own adventure in the sense that you don't have to read it linearly, like in a linear sense. You could hop anywhere because none of the stories are really connected. I did because I wrote a bunch, because basically anytime an author dropped out, I was just like, okay, I guess I'm writing this one. And so before all was said and done, I think I wrote about a good 10th of the stories, right? So I did some fun like connective tissue on a couple stories here and there. But the thing is, because you can jump into any character or combo or setting combo, it's just sort of almost this would be interesting. The only thing I'll say is if you go into the human mind as a setting, it gets dark. That was the one setting where I'm like, I thought people were going to have fun, but this is kind of rough. We're dealing with a lot of heavy emotions by having the human mind being the setting. So.
And quick
Have
question.
you gotten all your... Sorry, go ahead, Luna. Sorry.
No, I was going to ask because I'm kind of fascinated about that. Do you how are readers, how is it? Is it like, I'm a little lost. Is it like chapter 1, it's a different story, chapter 2 is a different story, so you can kind of read whatever chapter you want, or how is that structured?
Yeah, it's not even chapters because it's like a short story anthology. So you can so the table of contents basically says what the character and the setting combination is, and then who the author is, and then the title, of course. And then from there you could read it front to back cover wise and you'd be fine, right? Because you just read a bunch of different short stories, varying in like style. We've even got one that's written as a want ad, right? We've got one that's written. We've got some that like border on really long short stories. They're like 20, 30 pages long. So it's more just kind of like just explore all these different writers who are trying out different genres, different character and setting combinations. And we're just seeing what comes out of it. So, and I've got the third here because I can kind of show you the cover. Yeah.
Ooh, yeah, show us the goods.
So see, here's number 2. So each book kind of expands with more characters on it. So you can see like we've got the psycho killer here at the bottom, dinosaur, alien, imaginary friend, a kaiju, because I'm a big monster dork if you can't tell from the background, clown, and robot assassin is as far as we got. So initially we only introduced 5, I think, and then we keep adding more and more. So each anthology kind of adds more. And then on the back, you could see all the different settings, like, like an island, things like that. I can't remember all of them. So yeah, you've got apocalyptic wasteland, the human mind, the ocean, the Triassic, space, and an alternate future, and things like that. So we get a lot of timeline splits and things like that too.
That sounds really fun. It has the feel of like, whose line is it anyway? You know what I mean? Where they're like asking the crowd, give me a place, give me and then you have your authors kind of go with that. Are you
Mhm.
accepting submissions for your fourth book, or you already have all your selections made?
Yeah, I actually got the submissions years ago, but
Okay.
once I transitioned out of like book writing to film, I just kind of dropped off on the fourth, and I just need to put it all together and get it edited. Basically, just haven't had the time because I've only got so many projects to work on. So
Yeah, for sure. And Thomas, I know one of our lovely viewers, they love dinosaurs. They're like a huge fan of dinosaurs. You know who
mm,
you are, listener. So that you said something about a dinosaur story. How is it like? Does it show you how to read it to get the dinosaur story?
yeah, when you get any of the Crash Philosophy books, it basically like you can just kind of choose in the table of contents. It's organized by characters and by setting. So if you just really want to hone in on a character like the dinosaurs, you could just hop right to it and just go nuts,
Go
and
nuts.
then yeah, exactly. Um, or if you want to pick a setting, like if you want to go to the human mind, or if you want to head to the apocalyptic wasteland, if you're a big Mad Max fan, you can just kind of pick that setting and just read all of those. So
I love that. Now it's coming together now. Like depends on what kind of mood you're in. It's like, do I want to read about a wasteland, or you know what I mean? And you could just kind of pick and choose. I was wondering if you could kind of um tailor that for like a journal option for writers, for
mm,
like a daily kind of aspirations for a writer, like, okay, pick one and today you write about these three things, put them in a story, to kind of keep writers writing. I think that would be kind of interesting.
yeah, that'd be a blast because I've actually like got a prompt series that I wrote with a fellow author of mine. Her name is Melissa Coons. So that could almost be a new iteration of those prompts that we wrote of just sort of like, now try writing about, yeah, whatever it might be, a mutated spider that's suddenly going into a, grocery store, right? Just why not? So,
Yeah, maybe it'll definitely make those journal entries more interesting, right?
yeah, exactly. Well, and the thing is, like, the more you write, the better you become at writing, right? So sometimes you have to write like weird stories or things that just take a shot, right? I think my best story, which I'm trying to turn into an animated short, but that's like so early in the stages. I've only written the script, haven't even started talking to anybody, like, so in terms of pre-production, like I wrote the script and I wrote the story, but it was an imaginary friend in space, and I wrote one version, and I was like, okay, it's fine, and it was because I didn't have anyone to write that one. I had either somebody drop off or something like that. I don't remember why, but I had to write that one. So I wrote it really quick, and I was like, this is okay. But then as other author stories came in, I'm like, oh my God, they put too much time in this for me to put this story in with the rest. It would almost be like a disservice to these other authors. So I re-examined it and thought, like, okay, what can we do? And so I rewrote a completely new idea that deals with basically somebody who's abandoned in space and has no hope of getting back home. And so an imaginary friend shows up on the ship to almost be their emotional support, like alien on the ship. And it turned out to like be this like really kind of quirky and funny, but then like rips your heart out at the end kind of story. So it's just also really cool because the quality of the narratives from all these different authors, everybody was just bringing their own ideas and stuff. So it was really a fun experiment, despite how much time and exhaustion it is to put these anthologies together, because you're just wrangling literally 100 stories from 17 different authors. So
Was it rough to send out any rejection letters, since you've kind of felt that pain yourself?
yeah,
True.
there were only
Yeah.
a few. It's just because a lot of them I knew, so I knew they were going to do some quality work. There were a couple that I just had to say no to, just because the writing wasn't there on the same par as some of the others. Um, it stinks, but also because it is what was better for the whole anthology, it was good to send. In the sense that like it stinks because I'm a people pleaser by nature. I see your Slytherin banner back there. I'm a Hufflepuff. I'm way too loyal, way too like uh, adherence of making other people feel good sometimes. So I always have to kind of fight that instinct sometimes and just be like, hey, this was good, but it needs more work, needs more fine tuning. So this isn't the time that it's there. Feel free to edit it, do whatever you want with it after this. There's no contract binding you to this narrative, and you always want people to succeed too. I never want to send a rejection and be like, dude, what are you doing writing? That doesn't help anybody. You want to encourage people to create, because different people bring different voices, different experiences, and I've gotten so many rejections too, and it's made me better in the sense that I can read my own scripts, I can read my own books, and I get more critical of them now, because I can say like, no, this is an exposition dump. God, this line is terrible. I need to rewrite this. I know what I'm trying to do. The idea is good, but I need to rewrite it so the dialogue sounds more organic. Things like that. It takes that rejection.
Have you ever thought about writing like a young adult book? I mean, because that's how Harry Potter, was kind of put out there more as a young adult book, or like a children's book, maybe something a little more lighthearted.
Yeah, I've wanted to do that. I've written a short like novella that would work as like a kid's book and things like that. But I want some illustrations and stuff, and I'm not that good of an artist. I could do enough to like, do some fun little sketches and things like that. So it's one of those that I'm open to the idea, but I'm also just loving all the script ideas that I'm pursuing. I do have one that's kind of a family adventure that also involves a kaiju. Basically, it's like effectively like E.T. with a giant, Godzilla-sized monster as opposed to just a little tiny alien. So I'm still writing like scripts that would be something I could take my kids to, and things like that. But book-wise, it's just such an undertaking, especially with the illustrations, the formatting, and the layouts are much more complicated. That it kind of just is a little daunting, and I don't know if I've got the time for it. So.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Now, I did want to ask Thomas my favorite question that I always love to ask. Ooh, you guys ready for it?
Sure.
Are you gonna write a fantasy horror book in which some fantastical creatures are being chased by a Michael Myers like person?
That had not come across my mind, but that is a really cool premise. I really do love that, because I have like a lot of like kaiju monster style scripts. Doesn't involve many slashers, and like the horror movies I have are monster based. The horror scripts I've written and the ones I've outlined, but those are more like monster movies. I haven't actually merged them all. So maybe there's a world where I take the monster world and the slasher system script and just bring them all into one crazy shared cinematic universe or something like that.
Yeah, and you know what I just realized before I jumped on the stream? Army of Darkness is a fantasy horror movie.
Mm-hmm. And I love Army
And
of Darkness. So I that was actually one of those movies that was like a cable discovery on accident, because a friend of mine who was going to the Air Force Academy, he and I had to study because we sponsored him so that we could have a place to crash when he had to study or couldn't go home because he was from California. And we literally stopped where he just goes like, "This is my boomstick," and we're like, "Okay, we got to watch this one." And sure enough, fell in love with the Evil Dead world. So
Nice. So I was thinking like my pet kaiju, right? It would be interesting if the kaijus are the good guys and the humans are the bad guys. That could be like fantasy horror, as the humans being the real monsters. I think
yes.
I love it when they switch it around like District 9,
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's why I also
Yeah.
love Guillermo del Toro, because a lot of times his monsters are actually very sympathetic. Pacific Rim is a little bit of the outlier, but you look at Shape of Water, and stuff like that. A lot of times he has some sympathy for monsters. That's why I'm so stoked for his Frankenstein like reboot.
Yeah.
Just because the cast is phenomenal, and like he's been wanting to make this since he was a kid. So I am hoping and praying that it just comes together for him. I know they want to start filming next like February or something like that, as long as this SAG strike is over. So
Yeah, and if you look at history, not to get like off track or political or anything, but some of the political figures in history that caused chaos were considered quote unquote evil, right? So humans have had very, very evil people in this universe, in this plane of existence. So I can see why we would be featured as the villain, because we've had villainous people living amongst us. So
Yeah, I mean, 90% of zombie movies, the biggest problem is not the zombies. Even going back to like the old
yeah.
school Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead from Romero, we were typically causing most of the problems, and you see that with the fighting that they have inside the house in Night of the Living Dead, or how like everything just goes immediately to hell in Dawn of the Dead in that opening sequence where they're just like, attacking that like low rent apartment building and things like that. And then they fight over the shopping mall near the end, stuff like that. And then Day of the Dead, which I always thought was a little over the top, but then after the pandemic, and I was like, nope, that was actually pretty accurate. It's kind of one of those like, each moments where you kind of realize that, no, not that quick before the world falls apart. I remember I rewatched the Night of the Living Dead 1990 movie because I was on Sledgehammer Horror and we talked about that movie. And my wife, she doesn't watch the zombie movies that heavily with me, but when Ben has that line of like, doesn't take long for the world to fall apart, and she goes like, no, it doesn't. She just whispered that. So it was great.
So we talked about your love for Evil Dead and zombie movies. What are some of your like hidden gems? What is like a horror or horror sci-fi that you really love and you'd like more appreciation for?
Yeah. One that I think is gaining a bigger cult following is Trick or Treat. That anthology kind of like horror movie that kind of came out to like no real buzz or anything like that. But then I think as people have been able to see it on streaming, because that's where I discovered it, I absolutely love that one. I think it's fantastic. And the more I've gone on the festival circuit, the more I'm finding all these really great indie comedy, like horror kind of movies. Because we talk about Evil Dead, the more you get into like the Bruce Campbell era, the more it got really bombastic. So, I've seen a few, like there was one I saw in Los Angeles at Days of the Dead that was called Cannibal Comedian. And that's exactly what's happening. It's a guy who is both a cannibal and trying to be a stand-up comic. Completely quirky, way over the top. But I always love movies that have that kind of passion where it's like, no, we know how bonkers this is and we're just going to lean into it and just embrace it. It's another reason why one of my regular spooky season rewatches is Repo the Genetic Opera. Are you guys familiar with that one? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
I just love that movie because the thing is, like, there are some big plot holes. Some of the actors can't quite sing as well as they probably would if they had a bigger budget. But the thing is, like, you could tell everyone was so invested in making that movie as good as humanly possible. Like every cast member brought their A game. Even if they weren't able to sing, they still just gave it their all, and they just went for this weird, bombastic performance that is really also a good reflection of our healthcare system and where we might head in terms of profiting off of healthcare and things like that. So, I mean, those are a few of my deep cuts. And I just watched one that just hit streaming called Final Summer. That is a big nod to traditional slashers. I met John Eisberg, who is the writer and director of that in Atlanta. And we've just kind of kept in touch on social. And now his movie's actually available for streaming. And it's just a really cool nod and really great indie movie in terms of just low budget, but they made it work. They've found a way to make this cool throwback that takes place, I believe, in 1991. And it's sort of just good old slasher film, but updated for like current audiences, I think, in a really meaningful way. I also love my horror movies that have arcs. Sometimes when a horror movie just throws away your hero, your final girl's journey just for that final, like, oh, big scare. I'm like, come on, we had a good journey. And you just threw it away. So I really appreciated the arc in Final Summer.
Yeah, that was some good stuff there. Now, Thomas, what are some of the projects that you're working on right now that you can talk about?
Yeah, for sure. So the big one is Slasher Sessions, because that script has been in a lot of different festivals. I think I'm at about like 6 or 7 acceptances. I won the Tokyo Horror Film Festival. I was award nominated with Days of the Dead. I got 3rd place at Lit Scares. And basically, that is a short script, and I've got a feature written as well, where the idea is that all of the world's most infamous slashers are brought together for a group therapy session. The tagline is, let's go from killing to caring, right? So the idea is that you've got all the big slashers. I didn't actually write Freddy, Michael, Hellraiser, or anything like that. What I did was I made up my own slashers because I've watched all of them, all the major franchises. So I kind of made my own version of slasher characters. And they have to sit down with a woman who was a final girl, and now she's trying to reform them and see if it works. Some of it does, some of them don't. And it's just sort of a fun horror comedy. Shaun of the Dead is one of my favorites. And part of the reason I love it is that the punchlines and the jokes are there, but not at the expense of the stakes. So that in the sense that like it is still like really dangerous. You're in a room full of slashers, but it's also just the circumstances are what makes it funny. In the sense that you have a bunch of different slashers trying to work out their feelings and why they turned into the slashers that they became. That's the big one.
That sounds so hilarious. Have you seen fun. Tucker and Dale versus Evil? That's one of my favorites.
That's a great one as well. I think Alan Tudyk and the other lead, I'm skipping on his name because I haven't seen him in much else, but Alan Tudyk is just a god. I love that guy. He's just one of those guys who can hop into any project and fit. So he could be in a pretty heavy drama. He was in Patch Adams, but then he can go to Tucker and Dale versus Evil and just nail the comedy, or his show Resident Alien, and then hop into animated movies because he's now like Disney's like good luck charm in the sense that he's in like, if there's a Disney movie, you've got about a 90% chance right now that Alan Tudyk's going to be somewhere in there. So, I love Tucker and Dale versus Evil as well.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Yeah, any movie that kind of like also takes like the genre and just kind of flips it on its butt, on its ass in one way, shape, or form. Because the thing I also love about like Cabin in the Woods or Shaun of the Dead is that like it's almost as much spoofing the genre while also giving it a lot of love. It's almost as much of a love letter as it is a parody. And that's one thing that I always enjoy. So that's one of the things that Slasher Sessions does as well, is that there's a lot of nods about like the 80s in terms of like, you have sex, you die. There's one character basically just, we find out he's never had a real relationship, and that's why he keeps like slaughtering, teens and 20-somethings that keep like having sex before marriage and things like that. It's just because he's longing for his own relationship and he just won't admit it. So
that's great. Thomas, I have a question for you. What is one genre of like book or otherwise screenplay that you will not write? For example, rom-coms or anything like that you're like, nah, not for me.
I would say it's a subgenre of horror, and that would be the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Wrong Turn, Hatchet. I've heard some people call it Hicksploitation, in the terms of like it's rural, torture stuff, basically. I acknowledge Texas Chainsaw Massacre for what it did for the genre. The cinematography is incredible and stuff, but as a genre, all of those franchises just don't do much for me. So it would take, I don't know what it would take for me to write that genre, because I just feel like I wouldn't bring anything to it that would really do any benefit to the genre, in the sense that like I learned pretty quick, if you try to write something that's like only for money, or only just because you think it's something cool, or something to try, it's not worth it. I've learned that a couple times in terms of writing projects that just went nowhere, and just didn't work out. And it's because I didn't listen to that gut instinct I had of just saying like, I don't think this is going to work for me. I'm sure there's an audience for it, but I'm not it. So that would probably be it.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Miss Cat, do you have any more questions?
No, I don't. It's been a real pleasure getting to know more about you, Thomas, and about all your awesome work and how you You never give up, never surrender. That's one of my favorite quotes from Galaxy
Oh, I
Quest.
knew exactly what the quote was. Yeah. So, one of Alan Rickman's
So
best
it's
performances ever. So I'll put it up there with
yes,
Die
Yes.
Hard and all of his best Academy Award nominated work. So
Turn the page. That's my personal favorite. What is it? 300 and 334 or something like that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
394. I don't remember. So yeah.
So it's page number. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
It's been years, but that's a great line because he just sounded so monotone, like
Yeah.
394. Like, oh.
One of my
He's
favorites
mad.
too from Galaxy Quest was also when he says, like by Grabthar's hammer, just because there was a play I was in and we did a big musical number. It was called The Blob because we couldn't afford Grease. So we did a movie called The Nifty Fifties. That's basically what you do if you don't have the money to do Grease, right? As a high school production. And one of the songs is called The Blob. And there was a line I always had to say. And because my character was the old sheriff, I would always just have to come out and go like, it's the worst thing you've ever seen. And then I just ran off, right? But we ended up going around to schools to perform it for like elementary schools and middle schools. And so like, I just did it like dozens of times between rehearsals, performances, and then this weird little like school tour that we ended up doing. That line where he's just like, where Alan Rickman's like, I won't go out there and I won't say that stupid line one more time. Like it hit me because I had that one line that just I had to say every time we did that musical number. So
That's so funny.
Yeah, it's just the weird things where like art imitates life that you couldn't really plan for. It just kind of, you see it at the right time. Because I think that came out like later part of high school and things like that. And that's when I was doing that High School Musical. So.
That's great. Thomas, we are out of questions, right, Kat? So is there anything more that you want to tell our lovely viewers before we let them go out into the world?
Yeah, I would just say that if they want to learn more, find the books or anything like that, you could find me on Amazon. The books are available there. If you just want to find me, I'm thomasafowler.com. That's an easy website to find me. You can even hit slashersessions.com and it'll forward you there because I haven't quite built out the movie side of my website yet. You can also follow me on Instagram at Thomas A Fowler. I'm about to do my deep dive for this Halloween. I always do a deep dive on horror movies. And that started during the pandemic because I needed something to do in 2020 of October. So I watched every Universal monster movie and just kind of like ranked them, talked about them. And then I did the Halloween franchise. And this year I'm doing Friday the 13th because we actually have Friday the 13th coming up. So I thought that was a perfect time to go through it. So if you want to follow me on Instagram, I do that as well. So that's just at Thomas A Fowler. I make it easy to find me. That's part of my advertising background. So yeah, there's my website. Yep.
There is the website, so you guys can go to films, find all the films here, slasher sessions, a bunch of cool stuff we've been talking about. If you go to books, you'll find all the awesome books. You can get the book, the ebook, or the paperback. You can get making weights, right?
Make weights,
and then the one we were talking about, the crash philosophy, where you can make your own little story. Maybe you want a shark or whatever series you want to read. I'm definitely gonna probably pre-order the part 3 just so I have it pre-ordered and then just buy 1 and 2 because that sounds great.
Yeah, and that'll tell you how I need to update my website. It's no longer a pre-order; you can just get it. Yeah,
I'm like, pre-order now.
Available. 4 is the one I need to work on because that gets our 10th character in our 10th setting. That's going to finish that little that journey there. So, but
thank you for sharing the website. Our viewers can now check it out. It's really easy, as you saw. It took me like 3 seconds. thomasafowler.com. Boom, it's there, and you guys can watch all the fun stuff there and read all you want.
Thank you guys so much for having me on. This is a lovely conversation. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, of course. And if you guys liked what you saw, like, subscribe, share with all your friends. If you don't, then little crooked hand's gonna come get you.
And it's got a cover on it too now, so you could do some damage, with some blunt force trauma, right?
Yeah, with this part, it's like, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, exactly. We don't condone violence.
We don't condone violence unless you're reading about it in one of your books or
whatever.
Yeah,
it's on screen when the slashers all go at each other, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's what
only
we
that
say.
Time. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a great night. Hope you enjoyed the stream, and we'll catch you guys tomorrow for our fan day. We're going to have CJ from the Virosis show live, and we're going to be discussing the Grudge franchise. So that is going to be a good night. And he's from the UK. He's joining us from England. So please come out, give him some love, and we'll catch you guys tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.